Good morning. Happy Father's Day. My name is Jaime Sanchez. I'd like you to take a quick stock of how you feel right now. Think about what your body feels like. Are you stressed? Are you grinding your teeth? Are your shoulders relaxed? We're going to do a little breathing exercise to begin with today. This is a rather specific breathing exercise. It's called the 4-7-8, popularized by Dr. Weil, and it's specifically for anxiety. This breathing technique is pretty simple. You're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, you're going to hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then you're going to breathe out slowly for 8 seconds. All right. There are many apps on the Google Play Store or the iTunes App Store that can help you guide this. I'm going to show you one right now. This one's called Oak. This is a guided meditation app, but it also has a section for breathing. I particularly like this one, but you can find a bunch of different ones that are out there that employ the same 4-7-8 breathing technique. We're going to breathe in for 4. If you don't mind, take stock of how you feel in just that little short, condensed breathing exercise. These breathing techniques can be coupled with meditation, guided imagery, a bunch of different mindfulness techniques, but just doing this breathing technique can be very helpful for anxiety and stress. Usually you would do this for about 2 minutes, and you can do this at any time.
Anxiety is very common today, especially at this time when COVID-19, the pandemic, is all around the globe. Now, there are many reasons why we become anxious, and a lot of them are worry and fear, and what we don't know about, we fear and we worry about things. And there are various ways that we might try to overcome anxiety. One is if we have a good friend that we can share our trust to help us or try to help us. And we have to exercise. And of course, others say that we need plenty of rest, and that some even say omit coffee. That would be hard for many of us. But we have to say it's okay to say no sometime when we're asked to do certain things. But we try to live in the moment. That may help us, I'm not sure, but we have to try. And there are many quotations from famous people about anxiety. One from Anonymous many years ago: "The peculiarity of the New England hermit has not been his desire to get near God, but his anxiety to get away from man." And then a famous Frenchman in the 17th century said, "The state of man, inconstancy, boredom, anxiety." And then Woodrow Wilson, one of our finest U.S. presidents: "I cannot refrain from saying it, I am not one of those who have the least anxiety about the triumph of the principles I have stood for." Then a British man named Sir Bernard Montgomery in World War II said, "I am not a bit anxious about my battles. If I am anxious, I don't fight them. I wait until I am ready." So I hope all of us can deal with our anxious moments and try to cope and get through this pandemic that we're living, and hopefully we will.
Hi, my name is Jaime Sanchez. I have diagnosed generalized anxiety disorder. Generalized anxiety disorder is characterized by the persistent and excessive worry about a number of different things. This could be about money, health, family, work. This is the ADA's definition of generalized anxiety disorder. I also have some minor OCD tendencies, which I will talk about in a minute. First of all, it's 100% normal to have anxiety on any given day. We are human. We have bad days at work. We have been all stuck in traffic. We had, something burn on us in the oven or on the stove, and, kind of lose it a little bit. We've all been up at night worrying about something. And anxiety disorders becomes when they're more persistent, and there's not necessarily an immediate stressor. You may not be expecting a bad day at work, but you are always expecting a bad day no matter what. My particular anxiety disorder is health anxiety. I'm afraid I'm gonna die. And not in that we're all gonna die someday kind of thing, or will I leave a legacy kind of way. I quite honestly believed, and I will use the past tense a little bit, that at any given time I was going to die of some disease or some malady. This first kind of triggered in my early 20s. I was having a weird problem with one of my legs, and had this sensation that I had to move it, and it was very strange and weird, and I ended up going to the doctor a few times, and I ended up being diagnosed with restless leg syndrome, which is pretty benign. But in kind of trying to figure out what that was, I thought that it was MS or a tumor of some sort, or a million different maladies. I had my very first panic attack around that time. And if you've never experienced a panic attack, that's fantastic. I hope you never do. But a panic attack is basically a feedback loop for your emotions and your adrenaline fight or flight response. So something kind of scares you, you go into that fight or flight response, which builds up adrenaline to either run or fight. Typically, in my case, it's run, but that increases your anxiety, which again triggers more adrenaline, and this feedback loop kind of happens, and then you kind of get into a state of unable to act or move or do either fight or flight, because you were just caught in this, feedback loop. I'd like to show you what one looks like if you've never seen a panic attack. This is provided by a YouTube channel called Panic Banana. She has a wonderful series of videos where she talks about her health anxiety and her experiences with anxiety. I urge you to look at it and watch them if you're interested.
How you feeling?
Like I can't breathe.
Normally, if you can't breathe and you move, it changes. So that probably means it's in your head.
I'm worried I'm sick. I'm worried to get you sick. I'm worried you're gonna get in trouble if you're sick because you won't be able to breathe because you have asthma.
When did you start worrying? Because you weren't worrying earlier.
I don't know, I don't know, I just started.
But you weren't worried before that?
I wasn't thinking about it before.
You want me to keep going?
Not all panic attacks look the same. Mine kind of look like that. They're a little bit quieter. I've had a panic attack without ever saying a thing or anybody noticing. Anxiety has some similarities to cancer. It kind of goes into remission from time to time. So I was in a remission period for quite a while after that early 20s bit. And then a lot of external stressors piled up on themselves, and my father passed away. My brother passed away 6 months later. He died of a heart attack at 39. I was in my mid-30s at the time. I was convinced that I was going to die of a heart attack within a few years. I was constantly checking my blood pressure, 10, 15 times a day. This is the OCD part I was talking about earlier. This is often known as a ritual, something to reassure you that everything is going to be okay. So I would check my blood pressure to make sure it wasn't too high, and then when it wasn't too high, I would be reassured, but then I would check again a few minutes later if I felt even funny at all. And you get into this kind of feedback loop again about reassurance. Like, you need to be reassured that you are fine, or you're gonna just worry about being fine the whole time. I ended up going to the emergency room several times thinking I was having a heart attack. More likely than not, it was just a panic attack. I've had several EKGs, all of which look perfectly fine. All sorts of blood work, all of which is perfectly fine, other than some mild high cholesterol. I got a cardiologist. We did a complete heart workup, wore a Holter monitor for 2 weeks, just to make sure my heart was beating correctly. And sure enough, everything was absolutely fine. It's really hard to admit that it's all in your head. I was pretty close to asking for a CAT scan or a MRI to see if I had a brain tumor. And then I started going therapy quite often, about once a week for a while. I had to start working on it. Because even if I was sick, even if my heart was bad, the constant worry was not helping in any way. Eventually my anxiety went into remission thanks to therapy and a lot of anxiety management techniques that I'm going to talk about. But then, as anxiety does, it came back, and this time it knocked me down entirely. I believed that I was going to die if I fell asleep. I believed I was going to die in my sleep. There's no evidence to that effect. My heart scans were perfect every time I went to the doctor. But my brain just decided that fall asleep, you're gonna die in your sleep. So every night when I wanted to fall asleep, I would have a panic attack. Now, panic attacks are that feedback loop of adrenaline and fear and so on and so forth. So, with that much adrenaline running through your body, you can't sleep. I went for weeks at a time, only sleeping a couple hours. It was really bad. So, I went right back into therapy, into what sometimes a therapist will call crisis therapy, when you're there all the time, practically. I was there every week in therapy, trying to get over the crisis. This time the anxiety was so powerful that I needed to start taking medication for it. I worked with my psychiatrist and my therapist together, and we put together a medication that worked for me, that I think was, the right choice for me, and I started taking it. I was very afraid to take medication for it. I didn't want to rely on medicine. But it's kind of funny when we think about things like that, right? If I really did have a heart problem, and they prescribed me a medicine, I probably wouldn't hesitate in taking it. But when it comes to our brains, we tend to fight things like that. Also, culturally, Hispanics are very anti-therapy. They don't really talk about it very much, mental health issues. It's also seen as kind of shameful in a way, that you can't handle your own problems. So I started taking medication, continued therapy, continued working on all the different kinds of therapeutic anxiety methods that my therapist suggested I work on. And I started to recover again. It's kind of funny when anxiety starts to go away and you start to work on anxiety, you kind of miss it. It's always been there, you've had it for such a long time that when it starts to go away, you kind of start to look for it. You want to trigger yourself. You want to make yourself feel afraid because that's what you're used to. I haven't had a panic attack in over 2 years at this point, more or less. My anxiety is the best controlled it's ever been. I'm very thankful I have it under control at this point, because at a time like this with COVID, health anxiety is not what you want. You're given a scenario where worry is omnipresent, in life. Can you go outside? Can you order food? Is it okay to go to the grocery store? These kinds of things. So we do the few things that we can, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things you can do at home, things that you can integrate into your own routine to help with anxiety. Most of these techniques were given to me by my therapist, or they are from the Anxiety and Depression Workbook. This is kind of like the CBT manual, so to speak. There are several editions of this. You can get this on Amazon. It's a great resource for anxiety. And it's a workbook. You can kind of go through it, and it gives you things that you can work on. It's fantastic. It depends on the kind of therapy that you're going through. CBT is the kind of modern standard for therapy nowadays. There are other types of therapy. There's also DBT therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a subsect of cognitive behavioral therapy. There are very few lying on the couch, tell me about your mother type of therapists anymore. That's not really the kind of therapy that goes on anymore. However, you can find them. There are still, analysts out there. But typically that's not what modern therapy is like. Modern therapy is more about working through your issues, working through how to deal with your symptoms. Okay, so let's talk about how you can integrate some things into your life to help reduce stress and anxiety. And most of them are small things. There's one big one, but most of these are small things. And the big one is the one I have the most trouble with. Exercise. Going out for a walk, doing some sort of cardiovascular exercise for about 20 minutes a day is a huge thing if you have anxiety, because it helps you get rid of some of that extra adrenaline. This is the one that I'm the worst at. However, that being said, During my crisis times, like during the times when I was really bad off, I was exercising every day. Number 2, breathing. 2 minutes a day, maybe twice a day if you can. Try the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Or there are other breathing techniques. You can find one that you like, that works best for you. There's a bunch of them, but deep breathing really, really helps. Mindfulness. We've all heard the term, but what does it really mean? It means trying to stay in the now, not to worry about the future, and not to dwell on the past. That's really tough to do. So, how do we aid that effort? One of my personal favorites is games. Board games, video games. Games really help you focus in on what's happening currently. Puzzles do the very same thing. Your brain is bad at searching for something and doing something else at the same time. It's not really built for that, in a way. So while you're searching for puzzle pieces or trying to solve something, or in a game if you're trying to figure out how to best score something or things of that nature, it is very difficult for your brain to also worry about something else. Not that it can't do it, it's just difficult for your brain to do that. So if we force our brain into that kind of search mode where it's trying to find something, it helps ease that worry mode. You can also do this with an interesting technique called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you look for 5 things with your eyes that you weren't noticing before. The color blue in a game over here in my corner, a painting that I love over here on the left. 4 things that you can hear that you weren't really noticing before. I can hear the air conditioner currently running. I think someone is mowing the lawn 3 houses that way or 4 houses that way. 3 things that you can feel. So you feel how your jeans feel, like how denim feels. Feel the touch of a surface that you're not really sure about, maybe, just touch 3 things and get a sense of what their surface is like. 2, smells. Try to smell things in the air. You would think that there isn't any smell currently in your room, but I guarantee you there is. You just gotta stop and look for it. Sometimes you can smell what's in the carpet if you vacuumed it recently. You can smell maybe an old cooking smell from earlier today, or if you're brewing coffee or something like that. And the last one is taste. You do one thing that you can taste, and you just kind of smack your mouth a little bit, and you're like, yeah, that's the coffee from this morning, that sort of thing. But it puts your brain into this mode of having to look for something, right? And when you do it with the 5 different senses, as you get down to taste from sight, it gets more and more difficult. 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can feel, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Let's talk about panic attacks. How to help panic attacks. How to help somebody with a panic attack if you are witnessing one or you think you're witnessing one. First thing, make sure they're safe. Make sure they're not in a place where they might collapse or fall. Sometimes it's hard to move or hard to stay upright if you're in a really bad state, so you may fall. And if there's enough of an adrenaline feedback loop, you can sometimes pass out. There's this thing called the dive response, or the dive reflex, that happens in mammals when they dive underwater, especially if the water is cold. First, your heart rate slows. It does this to help conserve the oxygen that are in your lungs because you're currently holding your breath. Also, it kind of it constricts the blood vessels to keep the blood closer to the heart, so that the heat is at your core. And it does some things to your mental acuity at the time, because it doesn't want the adverse response to being in a cold water environment is to stay alert, but to not to panic, essentially. So we can actually trigger the dive response without having to dive into a ice cold pool. We can do this in a couple of different ways. We can take a bowl full of cold water and ice, big bowl, and you can plunge your head into it. Hold your breath under that water for a couple of seconds. Your heart rate will slow, and you'll be able to at least break that cycle so that you can get yourself out of that panic attack. Another way to do it is to hold your breath with your head down and put an ice pack at the back of your neck. This is typically the preferred method because you don't have to fill a bowl with ice water. But this can also trigger the type response. You can also, the 4-7-8 breathing technique is also very good for panic attacks if you can get calm enough to do it. It's kind of difficult in the middle of a panic attack to stop the rapid breathing. So this is something that needs to be practiced. So a lot of anxiety training for panic attacks is recognizing when one is about to happen, when you're elevating in your anxiety levels, and try to bring it down before it gets too far up that you can't control it anymore. If it gets out of hand, write it out. It will end. It will stop. Here's the key thing too. No one has ever died of a panic attack. It's never happened. It's never been recorded. It will stop eventually. The flow will diminish and you will come out of it on the other side. Screaming into a pillow. Getting angry. If you have a punching bag, start wailing on it. The opposite of anxiety is anger in the human brain. And they can't both live at the same time. Not really. So you can fight anxiety by getting angry. Scream into a pillow. You could visualize a person if you want to, and something to get yourself worked up. That will help combat the anger, but make sure you don't overdo it on the anger part. You gotta rein it in. Finally, this one's probably the simplest one. Check the facts. What are the facts about your anxiety? What are you worried about? And what are the facts? Not what you feel, but what are the facts? If you start to say something, well, I feel like that's not a fact. I feel like if I go outside, a bird's gonna hit me in the face. What are the facts? Are there birds that do this regularly? Are there birds outside of your house currently? When you start to analyze what the facts are, that triggers your analytic brain, which helps kind of overpower that irrational part of your brain. If you do this more and more often, your brain will get better and better at it. At saying, that's just a feeling, these are the facts. A lot of anxiety treatment is getting used to anxiety, of understanding what it feels like and letting that feeling just happen. And then letting it go. Understanding that yes, I feel anxious, this worries me, and then letting it go. Anxiety treatment is not about stopping the anxiety. It's about witnessing it and moving forward in spite of it. It's also the definition of bravery. For those of you having trouble with anxiety or depression, I've included a bunch of links and resources here at the end for you to call or visit to get more information. I implore you to use a lot of these techniques in your daily life and incorporate them. They will help. If anxiety becomes a persistent problem for you, I implore you to seek help. You are not weak because you need help, and you are not alone either. If you ever want to talk about anxiety with me, if you see me in person, I am more than happy to talk about it. Summer solstice is coming out, longest day of the year. Go out, enjoy the sun. Vitamin D is good for you, good for your mental health as well. Thank you for listening.